and here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
145! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? We don't need any more of these.
You are taking a live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where SpaceX is getting ready to launch the Starlink 12-21 mission a little over 45 minutes from now. I am Sawyer Rosenstein, and I will be your host for today's Starlink, which, of course, like all of them, is not your ordinary Starlink launch. Why? We'll get into that, don't worry. I am joined by a fantastic team, as always, here. On the airwaves with me tonight is Alex. How's it going, Alex?
Well, hopefully they are indeed airways and not runways, right? I wanted to make my own pun there, but yeah, let's see. The West Coast has not had the same amount of luck lately with that SpaceX launch. We'll probably talk about that as well. I've seen some people talking about it in chat, so we're probably going to get some questions and we'll talk about it. Hopefully, the Starlink launch will not go the same way.
You beat me to the punch. I was going to mention that we would talk about that mission, so.
Oh, God.
Speaking of, oh God, Max Evans is joining us from the field. How's it going, Max?
I don't know why. I just couldn't hold it in, Sawyer. I'm sorry. But good evening, everybody. And yeah, we are back with some Starlink action here on the Space Coast of Florida. But I have to say, it is very blustery tonight, just like it was in Starbase. But hopefully that does not deter Falcon 9 from becoming airborne tonight.
That is what we will hope. Yes, you can hear that wind blowing through Max's mic a little bit. And we're doing our best to try and make the view as not shaky as possible, and that is also done with the assistance of Mr. Kevin Michael Reed, who is pushing the buttons and pulling the levers, and bringing to you the views for tonight's launch attempt. Oh, I missed it. You're right, topping us. Speaking of, oh God, it's KMR. Now, a reminder, if you have questions, you can tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can throughout the broadcast tonight. Now, Alex, can you kind of give a brief description of this particular Starlink mission? Are they all regular satellites? Are there direct to cells? And what way is this one going?
Yeah, so this mission is launching another batch of Starlink satellites. There are 21 on board of this Falcon 9, and 8 of them are regular Starlink V2 mini satellites, but 13 of them are Starlink Direct to cell satellites. This is Starlink Group 12, which means this is going to a 43-degree inclination orbit, carrying those direct-to-cell satellites into that orbit, which means this launch is going to go and head southeast. It's going to target a 284 by 294 kilometers sort of target orbit. It'll be doing that with a 2-burn profile on the second stage, so it'll burn first to get into a preliminary parking orbit, and then that orbit will be circularized. Once it gets to the apogee, the highest point in its orbit, it'll do a 1-second burn, approximately 50 minutes after launch, and that'll be setting up those it'll get those satellites up into that 284 by 294 kilometer orbit. Now, as for the first stage, of course, it'll be landing offshore on a drone ship called a Shorefall of Gravitas for this mission, and the fairing halves will also be recovered by ferry recovery vessel Doug out there in the Atlantic Ocean. So hopefully we get all that in just less than an hour from now.
Yes, and we were fortunate to finally have an idea of what the direct-to-cell satellites look like, as you saw there, Kevin putting that up on the screen, thanks to a T-Mobile Super Bowl commercial.
Yep.
Now, this booster that you see on the screen has quite the reputation under its belt, and this is another one with a decent turnaround and quite a load of flights under its belt. Alex, can you help me read through this list here? Because there's a lot.
Ooh, boy. Okay, so this is booster B1069. It's flown already 21 missions. It's flying for a 22nd time on this mission. Gonna go through those. CRS-24, Starlink 423, Hotbird 13F, OneWeb 15, Starlink 53, SES 18 and 19, Starlink 56, 512, 69, 619, 628, 636, 639, 647, 657, 101, 109, 810, 108, 666, and 12.3. It's done a lot of missions. And it just recently launched on that 12.3 mission just 34 days ago. So it's quite nice that, it's not a long turnaround time, at least this time around. Because there was a really long turnaround time between 666 and 12.3. But, more fortunately, we got this one just 34 days, excuse me.
Yes, this booster is indeed quite nice. I forgot, as you pointed out there, B1069 launching 6-9, also 666, so all the fun numbers in there.
Yep.
And tonight, we have a palindromic number. This is 1221, which backwards is 1221.
Funny enough, it was supposed to launch 669 too, but it never did.
Oh, what a shame.
They changed the booster.
Yeah, thanks, SpaceX. Anyway, one of the big concerns tonight has been the weather. Max, we could see the shake. What's the weather looking like, and what was the latest forecast info that we had?
Indeed. The primary concern for tonight is, of course, the winds, as you can probably tell from our constant companion called Camera Shake this evening. But just visually, there are some clouds in the area, but we can still see a ton of night sky and a ton of stars and a bright glowing moon around us. But again, that wind is ever so prominent here around the Kennedy Space Center and the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where Slick 40 is placed. Last we checked from the forecast from the 45th Weather Squadron, the weather was only 60% probable, or I should say 60% favorable in terms of the liftoff tonight, and the window only goes until 12:14 a.m. I guess technically tomorrow morning. But that remains the primary concern for tonight. And honestly, the clouds are moving rather quickly. So I can't imagine these would be maybe record winds for Falcon 9 to fly in, but they would not be a small task, especially with the payload of Starlink satellites tonight.
Yeah, the wind is obviously one of the major concern items tonight. And the last that we saw in terms of the weather board that we sometimes see ahead of these launches is that the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station winds were both red. And there was observed winds of, 30 to 50 knots is the strong wind advisory currently for Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and the Kennedy Space Center. So something that is absolutely going to be watched throughout the night.
Red is bad.
Yeah, it's been bad down here too. Now, there's a couple big missions here coming up, and one of them I do want to point out was what happened tonight, or what was supposed to happen tonight, and ended up not happening tonight, and hence my pun earlier. And that was the Sphere X mission with a bunch of payloads, including one called Punch. That was the pun there. How come that's not going tonight, Alex?
Well, that mission that was supposed to launch from Vandenberg in California, unfortunately, they first and foremost, they had a very terrible weather out there. If we're complaining about the wind here on the Space Coast, the weather there on Vandenberg, it was really horrible. It went down to just 10% favorable conditions for launch. It's also just a 30-second window, right? Whereas with Starlink, they can move a bit here and there. Today, though, this is the last opportunity for the day for this Starlink launch, so that's why we're hoping it goes on time and whatever. But yeah, they had first that weather issue, and then on top of that, the spacecraft had an issue as well. So they took the safe route and said, you know what, let's scrub it for today, and we'll go tomorrow with that. So far, it looks like they're trying again in 24 hours, so hopefully they get that off the ground tomorrow, but we'll see.
Yeah, and there's another launch coming up that also has a very tight window and will
Mhm.
likely affect this launch if it does not fly tonight. Max, we have Crew 10 coming up in a couple days, right?
We do indeed, and there is a lot of press around that mission in particular. But that is heavily dependent on a variety of factors, weather being of course among them. And last we checked, the weather was greater than 95% favorable for liftoff, which is really about as good as a forecast can get for any mission in particular, let alone for a crew of 4 heading to the International Space Station. But assuming Starlink does not go tonight, because of a rule on the range that crews need to review data from Falcon 9, they cannot launch. No other mission that is a non-NASA mission can launch within 24 hours of a NASA LSP mission. And in this case, Crew 10, if the window for tomorrow, if it was like it was tonight, would fall within that 24-hour rule. So that means it would be able to go at the earliest Wednesday night, assuming that rule does end up applying. We never know if that's actually going to be the case or not. At least at this point, weirder things have happened, but that is the safe assumption for now. But we will find out in just a few minutes whether or not SpaceX has begun prop load on Falcon 9, which would be a strong indicator that they are going to attempt to get Falcon 9 off the ground tonight.
That's a good point. Alex, we should be passing just at this about 12 seconds ago. Decent milestone in terms of the countdown. Can you kind of give us the run through of where we're at?
Yeah, so sorry. Approximately T-minus 45 minutes or so, they begin the go-no-go poll for propellant load. It's an electronic poll and everything. It usually takes 5 to 7 minutes to wrap up. Around the T-minus 38 minutes, that's when the launch director verifies that everything is go for propellant load for Falcon 9. And so that's one of the things that should have happened already by now. And if that is go, then we should have propellant load starting at T-minus 35 minutes on Falcon 9. That propellant load sequence starts first with RP1 being loaded on both stages and liquid oxygen on the first stage. Then approximately at T-minus 16 minutes, then we get that liquid oxygen load on the second stage. So they sort of stage that propellant load sequence on the second stage. Now, the problem here, of course, as you were alluding to, we just don't know right now, right? Because we don't have any access to that countdown loop, and there's no feed from SpaceX or whatever. So we need to rely on what they say either on X or what we see here on the Falcon 9 rocket. So as they load that liquid oxygen on the first stage, that tank will get frosty. Usually we see that frost approximately at the T-minus 32 minute mark. If it's too dry or whatever, which is weird in Florida, but sometimes certain days it's dry, right? You see the frost a little bit later in the count, maybe T-minus 30 minutes, but usually around that sort of window of T-minus 32 to T-minus 30 minutes into the count. So in about 6 minutes, we'll definitely know if we are still onto that T0, unless SpaceX says anything beforehand, of course.
Exactly. If SpaceX says otherwise, then yeah, we'll know for sure. But for now, the best thing that we have is to keep an eye on the frost, which, if all is go, as pointed out, we are 45 seconds away from the propellant load beginning, with both the RP1 and LOX on the first stage, and then the RP1 on the second stage. Bideford, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Very much appreciate that. And also, thank you to Jay Keegan in the background for fixing the panel, so now I can actually thank Bideford properly. I'm not calling you out, Jay, just calling you out. Anyway, continuing on. John Cook wants to know, Max, any Cape security sightings?
Honestly, I haven't seen a ton. And for those who are not familiar, these are the alligators that are ever so present around this part of Florida, and even more so the farther south you go. And in particular, here at the Kennedy Space Center, it shares land with the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge, so there is a ton of wildlife to go around, including the likes of the American alligator. And there are a ton of them around. But, honestly, I haven't seen a ton out and about, let alone around here at the press site or around anywhere at the Kennedy Space Center. Granted, it has been a bit chilly, and they do not like cold weather that much, so that could be a part of it. But I haven't seen a whole lot yet. But give it a few weeks until the weather really begins to warm up, and we start entering the weather that is prominent around summer, and we will see tons around, and also probably hear a lot more at night here for, I'm sure, as we have many more late night Starlinks to come.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about them is you can very much hear the gators. Even if you can't see them at night, you certainly hear them. They make themselves known, and it's a unique sound. It's one of those things where until you hear it in person, the internet doesn't do it justice of just how scary weird it is to hear in person. I don't know the right words for it.
I mean, by this point, we've heard it so many times that, I mean, I guess just for me personally, being out here in the field, like, you get used to it after hearing it so many times. And the reason why they do that is I'm sure that they're not the happiest being bombarded by acoustic energy of 9 Merlin 1D engines of Falcon 9 as often as they are. So that's probably why they are making that noise. They're not the happiest creatures after a launch.
I mean, they're not the happiest creatures to begin with, but yeah, good point.
I mean, that's debatable. I mean, alligators, it's kind of controversial to say, but from what I've seen and from what I've heard from locals is that American alligator, this is obviously a heavy exaggeration, but American alligators, especially by comparison to caimans or the American crocodile, they're just basically frogs with teeth when it comes to their temperament. Obviously, don't approach them, don't try and pet them or hug them as much as you may want to. Do not approach them, but they are rather, I guess, I don't want to say the word tame, but they are rather, I guess, loosely tempered, especially compared to caimans or crocodiles.
Cool.
There's
so
also
next time we see one, we gonna hug them.
So I will plead the fifth on that one.
Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
there's also a good chance that you may visit Florida and you will not see any of them. Just if you have any bad luck, couldn't happen to anybody, right?
No.
Well, Alex, you also didn't go out looking for any, did you?
I did, and we didn't see anything. D brought me. It's too much inside baseball, I guess. But yeah, I went to where they are, and they were all hiding from me. Am I that scary? Anyways, you know what's not being hiding? I'm seeing already
Frost line?
some condensation, some frost there on the liquid oxygen. You can see there, sort of waving in the wind.
Yeah.
It also a lot of wind, as you can see there in the zoom view, because that's not us. That's the wind.
Yeah, and the latest again from the KSC weather board is that winds are still red for Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and Kennedy Space Center, which means strong wind gusts of 25 to 50 knots, it looks like, or 35 to 50, observed at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Apocalypse Cow, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Very much appreciate that. Austin Skirvin with the $5 tip at tips.nasaspaceflight.com. Although Captain Yek wearing his kilt in a kayak is not here, I want to wish him a happy birthday. Go Falcon, go Starlink. Yes, in case you didn't know, today is Jack Byer's birthday. So a huge shout out to our favorite Jack Byer here at NSF. And Flippers79 also happy birthday to at Jack Byer. Everyone wish Jack a happy birthday in chat. How old is he?
He's about that old.
How old? Yes.
Older than the gators in Florida.
Right. Ouch. They're dinosaurs.
He probably feels like it, to be honest. But you know what? That's just part of getting older.
He's like ancient now.
Probably.
Says the voice of God, Kevin Michael Reed. Hi. How old are you, Kevin?
Not ancient.
Yet.
Anyway, let's continue on with some actual questions here. Here's one. It's not necessarily about Falcon 9, but it's still a good question because we talk a lot about the different propellants. Falcon 9 uses liquid oxygen and RP1, rocket propellant 1. Dylan's wondering, what's the difference when companies talk about LCH4 and LNG, so methane and liquid natural gas? Alex, you got this one?
Okay, yeah. So certain companies use it as a shorthand for liquid methane. But others do actually, when they say LNG, they actually mean LNG. LNG is just basically a bit more of a mix of other materials. You have ethane, for example. You have, in certain combinations, you may even have propane and things like that into the mix. Essentially, it's less refined version, right, of the methane. Now, they are what I said at first, though, that there are companies that use it as a shorthand for methane. It's because they do use methane, like really high refined version of LNG, which is by all means methane, like something like 99% or 98% methane. But they still call it LNG because they want to be, PR and whatever. I'm not dissing companies. Like, this is like, what one of the CEOs, Tori Bruno, he said that it's just a shorthand for methane, that they use a really highly refined version of LNG that it's pretty much methane. And so, sometimes it can be a little bit diluted out there in terms of what's PR and what's actual for real LNG. I believe, though, that so far the only company that has properly used LNG has been Relativity with the Terran 1 rocket. They used something like 95%. It was less pure, essentially, and some other percentages of ethane and propane and whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, and we actually have an article coming out tomorrow going into even more of the details on the latest Terran R, which will also be using that. So, good little plug to check out nasaspaceflight.com for the actual latest news as well, too, and follow the socials where we will post the link. Here's an interesting one. Max, John Cook is wondering, how do the Starlinks maneuver once they're in orbit?
So the Starlinks, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but the V2 minis have ion thrusters, and that helps them maneuver up in space, and that helps them raise their orbit when needed or lower their orbit. And do they have cold gas thrusters to help?
No.
I guess they don't. Okay. So they have ion thrusters to either raise or lower their orbits when needed, or if they have to deorbit themselves, that they have the ion thrusters to lower their orbits to do that. But what else, Alex? Help me out here. What else do they have on board?
Yeah, in terms of propulsion, they only have those Hall effect thrusters based on argon. And the other thing that they have, because you may think, well, how do they, change their attitude? Just like the ISS, they use control moment gyros, CMGs as they call them, gyroscopes essentially, and they drive those in order to be able to rotate in one direction or the other. And so they have that ability to be able to control their attitude that way. It's a very simple way to do in low Earth orbit. You have options to de-spin those CMGs and whatever, those gyros, using the magnetic field of Earth, for example. Like, that's what Hubble does, for example, to maintain its attitude control. It doesn't have any propulsion systems. So the same thing with Starlink. Those thrusters are in principle just to raise or lower their orbit, but not to control their attitude. Their attitude is just gyros, essentially.
Could you talk to me about my attitude?
Hey, it could be worse. It could be Ship 34, right?
Ouch.
Or Ship 33.
Or Ship 33. That really had a bad attitude.
Yeah. Which, again, if you want to catch up on some of the latest with everything with Ship 34 in the most recent flight, we just posted Starbase Update. So make sure you check that out here on the channel today to get the latest on what we've seen since the launch, and some analysis, and some Jack, because we all love Jack. Which, Apocalypse Cow wishing happy older than Gator's birthday to Jack with the super chat. So thank you for that. Here's a good question. Alex, I don't know if we get the exact answers for these, but Greg Lopez is wondering, what parts of the world will this batch of lower orbit Starlink satellites serve? Do we know where this actually serves, or just the basis of the shells?
It just serves the globe, but depending on the inclination, of course, you can cover other places, or like when you have a constellation like Starlink, which covers from east to west, you have to think more about north or south. So whereas a traditional geostationary satellite, because it's always in the same place over the Earth, it always can, it cannot cover other places of the globe than that, right? Unless it moves on its orbit. Starlink covers every place in the world except those are outside of their inclination, right? So this is when it's going to a 43-degree inclination, which means their ground track will go as far north as 43 degrees north and as far south as 43 degrees south. Now, it's not true that it just can cover that, because since it's elevated, right, it's like, depending on the altitude, maybe 380 or 520, depending on which of the altitudes it's going to go. It can see a lot of the Earth, right, at once. So, it can maybe go all the way to 45 degrees north or 45 degrees south. But still, it's just those mid-latitude locations that it can see. This is why a lot of these satellites are being launched to 43 and 53 degree inclination orbits, because the majority of the world is in that sort of range of 43 to 53 degree north, or even to the south. If you look south, South America, you have Australia, you have New Zealand. It's also, mid-inclination to the south as well. And so you have all of these usually being launched to that. If you look at which are the shells that are being less populated on the Starlink constellation, those are 70 degrees, 96 degrees, for example, which go near or over the poles. But obviously, there's not a lot of need for coverage on the poles. So there's fewer of those satellites there. There are still satellites that cover that. In this case, as I was saying, these are going to cover mid-latitude locations. So, anywhere, Central Europe, Central the US, all of those regions are 43 degree either north or south. They're going to see that.
Yeah, within a little bit of deviation of that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I guess that brings into the whole question of the difference with the shell numbers. So what exactly is Starlink, the 12-21? For those who don't know, the 12 is the number of the shell, and the 21 is the number of missions within that shell that are not necessarily sequential. So Starlink shell 12 is where, Alex?
You mean in terms of number of launches right now?
Yeah, where are we at in terms of how many we are seeing now? Since it's technically mission number 21, but it doesn't mean it's the 21st.
Yeah, this is the 16th launch of Group 12, but obviously the mission it's the 21st. It's a weird thing. You can probably talk about how the shuttle was the same.
Bingo. But yeah, and so they're still launching to the other shells, though, correct?
Yeah, they're still launching to other shells. They're still launching to 53 degrees. They're still launching. Very recently, from Vandenberg, they did a launch to 70 degrees with the Group 15-1 mission. That was the first one that they have launched with V2 mini satellites directly, like an entire launch just for that from Vandenberg with those. So they're still serving some of the other shells. As I was saying, those higher inclination orbits, they are rare, but they're still launching those satellites because they need some coverage also in high latitudes and also over the poles. It's, there's some services, of course, there.
Yeah, there's definitely the polar ones as well. Also, Southern Polar Launch Corridor. Just saying it so it's out in the wild now. You're welcome. At this point, I see people asking, where will I be able to see the launch tonight? Well, here's your answer on the left side of your screen. This is a look at the area of which it will be seen and about how long after launch. So that T+ will be the time into the mission. So about 30 seconds in is when the Orlando area will start to be able to see it. Daytona Beach gets it about a minute in. Then we have about a minute and a half into flight. We start getting further south and west. So that's when you get Tampa, Jacksonville to the north, Palm Beach County to the south. Then you add in Fort Lauderdale and Miami right around Mico there at about 2.5 minutes. And it continues outward over towards the Bahamas as well. Now, one thing that we can also see tonight, which you'll see on the right side of your screen there, is the T-minus 20 minute and 20 second vent. Max, what is the vent and what does it tell us about the weather?
As you can probably see, the camera almost just blew over there, folks. So give me a couple minutes, and I will get that back up for you as soon as possible. Sorry, Sawyer.
No, it's all right. There's your answer about the wind. Well, that was a different kind of vent, the knocking over the camera part. But Alex, what is the vent coming from the rocket?
Yeah, so this is just part of the process to get the rocket ready for launch. At T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds more or less, they wrap up that RP1 load on the second stage, and then they get ready to load liquid oxygen on the second stage. That'll be in about 3.5 minutes. At T-minus 16 minutes, that's when that liquid oxygen load begins on the second stage. And prior to that, you know how warm can be Florida, right? But even if you were in the coldest place on Earth, it will still be very hot for the very cryogenic cold liquid oxygen that they load on the second stage. So they need to cool down that line that goes to the second stage to load that liquid oxygen. That line needs to be conditioned and cooled down before they load that liquid oxygen. So these vapors that you see, those are gaseous oxygen coming off from one vent on the transporter reactor on the Stromback, that structure to the right of the rocket, that is the one that actually loads that liquid oxygen on the second stage. So they need to condition that line, and so it cools down, and therefore the liquid oxygen boils off, and that boil off needs to go somewhere. That's what the vent is. So good vent, because it's the one that keeps everything on track. That essentially means we are 18.5 minutes away. It happened right at T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. That's exactly where we expect it to happen on the timeline. So hopefully we get that launch in 18 minutes and 20 seconds from now.
Hopefully we get the launch, and hopefully the camera stays upright between now and then. Once that vent stops, by the way, we will, which should be about T-minus 16 minutes, that's when we know the liquid oxygen load will begin on the second stage. Max, are you still upright?
For the moment, I am. That was quite the timing and quite the event to happen. Like, literally, as you cut to me for a question, the camera literally, I just see it off the corner of my eye. Oh, sorry, just watching right now. It's gotten significantly more breezy here in the last few minutes. The camera almost just completely blew over, and that was terrifying. That's not something you ever want to see. But yeah, the wind has picked up considerably here in the last few minutes, so I would commend SpaceX for trying to push for this window tonight, but good lord, it is quite breezy.
Yes, and a reminder again at this point, the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station are both under strong wind advisories here, so that means winds observed between 35 and 50 knots, both at the Kennedy Space Center and the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which is where Space Launch Complex 40 is located. You can see the flags at the KSC press site there waving like crazy. And
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty strong.
That's the first time I've ever actually had a camera almost blow over, especially live on air. That was something.
And probably, oh, sorry, I was going to say that knowing SpaceX, they're probably going to try and go all the way to as close as T0 as they can get. Wind is usually not a concern for fueling the rocket, so they may just try and fully load the rocket and see if the wind dies down for the T0. Of course, as we get closer, it's a bit concerning, but we'll wait for any confirmation from SpaceX, of course.
And they have to have some confidence in the fact that they can get Falcon 9 off the ground tonight, because if they happen to abort close to T0, they have to eat that cost in propellant. Oh, there's another big breeze! Holy cow! Yeah, if they have to abort at any point now before T0, they're going to have to eat the cost of propellant, which is not cheap for Falcon 9, but scrubs are cheaper and better than RUDs. But they have to have some confidence in that the wind will either die down or be within limits of flight tonight in order for them to even proceed this far into prop load.
They're hoping for that window there, which, by the way, in case you're wondering, we talked about the winds over at Space Launch Complex 40, the vent stopping, meaning that liquid oxygen load completing up on the launch tonight, which is a Falcon 9 launching from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. This is the Starlink 12-21 mission, bringing more Starlink V2 mini satellites up into space. Alex, are these all V2s? Are there also any direct to cell ones in there? What do we have?
Yeah, there are 21 Starlink satellites, but it's a mix of 8 Starlink V2 mini satellites and 13 direct to cell satellites that are going on this mission. The next mission out of the Cape with Starlinks on board, that'll have 23, and the mix will be 10 and 13. They're doing this sort of thing of mixing, different mixes, I guess, mixing of mixes. of satellites. Yeah.
The mixing the mixes. Yes, exactly. And one thing that we don't want to get mixed up, though, is the boosters. And for tonight, we have booster 1069, which has quite a long history of flights under its belt. In case you're wondering, this booster that you see on screen has previously flown on. Let me make sure I have all of my breath for this. I believe CRS 24, Starlink 4-23, Hotbird 13F, OneWeb 15, Starlink 5-3, SES 18 and 19, Starlink 5-6, 5-12, 6-9, 6-19, 6-28, 6-36, 6-39, 6-47, 6-57, 10-1, 10-9, 8-10, 10-8, because that's not confusing, 6-66, because that's not ominous, 12-3, and now tonight's 12-21. And Max, wind pending. This is supposed to be a drone ship landing, right?
That is correct. Assuming they proceed down to T0 and they get all 9 Merlin engines to light, the first edge will be heading downrange to land on SpaceX's drone ship, a short fall of Gravitas Station around 600 kilometers southeast of the east coast of Florida. So also, on that last note about 1069, it's worth noting that this booster had a very, I guess, tricky start to its life in that from the CRS-24 mission, that was also a drone ship landing, but the seas were, I guess, rough that night, and it came down at just the wrong moment during a swell and had a very difficult and hard landing on the drone ship and just about crushed 2 of the landing legs, and it actually crunched a lot of the Merlin 1D engine nozzles on the first stage. We all thought it was going to get scrapped, but SpaceX obviously didn't think so, and they went ahead and repaired the booster, and it has had a pretty long life since then.
Yeah, the crush cores that are built into the legs to try and assist in the event of a rough landing did their job for the most part, although some engines took a beating as well. That was a rough first flight, and yet here we are on its 20, what do we have? 21 flights here now. This is unbelievably awesome.
And I believe that was also before they fitted those new self-leveling landing legs.
Yes, definitely before the leveling landing legs, which assist to try and deal with the rougher seas to allow them to land in higher wave heights.
It's worth mentioning that the recent loss of the booster, though, if anybody asks or anything, it was caused by a leak on an RP1 line on an engine, which then caused the fire. So if that were not had happened, is that even said correctly? Anyways, if that hadn't happened, then the booster had been, nice and But yeah, this one in particular, booster B1069, it's quite incredible that we are already at the 22nd launch when, it had that first landing, which was quite scary, that return of that booster.
Yeah, I believe there's still some pictures up somewhere. I know we posted them on the social accounts when it first happened, but yeah, they're crazy pictures if you get a chance to look back at B1069's first flight. Now, one thing that we talk about with the boosters that comes up on that screen that Kevin shows with the information is we talk about stubby nozzle, no, thankfully, as it's written for this one. Ari Guest is wondering, can you explain the benefits of stubby nozzles, and also what does that actually mean? Alex?
I'll go first because I know Max loves the stubby nozzles. And I know he's going to be like, oh, they are great. They are awesome.
That's why I threw it to you first. I knew it was coming.
Yep. So the stubby nozzles, they are used only on very specific missions where they don't need the full performance of Falcon 9. So in today's mission, they do need that full performance. Starlink missions try to squeeze as much performance out of Falcon 9 as they can, right? So we're going to see a full MVAC nozzle on the second stage, not a short nozzle. Now, the thing with a short or long nozzle is that MVAC engine has an extension to it so that they can get as much performance out of it in the vacuum of space, because in the vacuum of space, the exhaust expands, right? And so they want to take as much advantage of that expansion as they can. And so you put a very big nozzle on the end of your engine. However, the nozzle extension on the MVAC engine, which is made of niobium alloys, it's really complicated to make, and it costs a lot of money to source that niobium. So between lengthy manufacturing times and also very costly. If you can trim down the cost and the use of materials by building a shorter nozzle, then you can get away with having to, spend much money and as much time on it. So the problem is, of course, as I was saying, you cannot take as much advantage of that expansion of the exhaust as you could with the longer nozzle. So they only use that on missions where that performance allows for Falcon 9 to carry out its mission and have a lower performance to orbit. So things like transport missions or, some low Earth orbit satellite that weighs nothing essentially, right? So they carry those on those missions. So now Max will say, but hey, it's actually good because they optimize the time and they optimize the money and whatever. But it's actually used only maybe like a handful of times every year. It's not that much use, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not used terribly often because they do often need that extra performance from the Merlin vacuum engine on the upper stage. But ideally in any scenario, the nozzle for any vacuum optimized engine would be indefinitely or infinitely long. But obviously there is a point where the trade-off between performance of the engine and the weight of the nozzle is negative rather than positive. So obviously they cut off where the nozzle begins to either weigh too much or they just the performance of the engine just is not worth the weight of the extra material made of that is making the nozzle extension. So MVAC Stubby saves weight, saves cost, and saves manufacturing time. But again, the extra performance is often needed out of the upper stage, and they do need that for all these Starlink missions, because what's easy to forget is that all these Starlink payloads are actually fairly heavy, and they squeeze in as much as they possibly can. That's why they have been able to optimize and evolve the throttling profile of the Merlin 1D engine over the last 3 years and extract more performance out of them on Falcon 9's first stage. So, but that's also the first stage, not the MVAC. But MVAC Stubby good or not. You are free to make your own decision. I'm in favor of MVAC Stubby. I guess you guys can come to your own conclusions.
No, Stubby bad. That's my conclusion.
It looks bad.
Well, it does not look bad. It looks cool.
No.
I think our definitions of cool are different, Max.
It's like a third of the length of the usual MVAC nozzle extension. It looks like somebody went out and just, cut the whole thing, when they do that on... Anyways.
Who decapitated Merlin Vacuum? But anyway, one thing we can all agree is that we love Falcon 9 and we love boosters, right? Now here's a question, folks. Have you hugged a booster today? Why does this feel like the start of a 1950s commercial? It's not. It's actually a 2025 commercial for shop.nasaspaceflight.com. We have our newest merch that came after the landing of the most recent Starship booster, where the chopsticks kind of hugged it. And so we joke, have you hugged a booster today? Well, now you can wear it on your shirt. Shop.nasaspaceflight.com. And now it comes in orange. It's orange. Now, Max, it's windy, so I'm going to let you tend to the cameras as we get under just to about 6 minutes until launch. So we will talk to you after.
Yeah, it is indeed that time before liftoff, and I have to make sure the cameras that are out here do not blow over again before liftoff, because that would make for a very bad night for a lot of people involved, especially for everyone who is watching with us tonight. So thank you very much, gentlemen, and I will see y'all on the other side.
Sounds good. I do want to thank a few people here. Two Frog Tree, thank you for becoming a Pad Rat member. Mock Diamonds, great name. Gifting a Red Team membership. And BWJC, wow, is the Cape always this windy? It's my first time here. Winky face. Yes, Chris Bergen pointing out, of course, that the Florida Tourism Board lying with the beautiful sunny skies and clear weather. Trust me, you don't want no wind. That is horrendous. Light breeze is fine. This, as pointed out, according to the weather that KSC provides, the wind levels are still at a very high level, 35 to 50 knots observed at both Kennedy Space Center and the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which is where this is currently located. So you could see that shake. In terms of the vehicle frost, Alex, is it up all the way?
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was looking at for the last 5 minutes or so. While we were talking about the stubby nozzle and whatnot. That frost on the first stage has not grown for the last 5 minutes, and by now that liquid oxygen tank should be nearly fully frosty because liquid oxygen load on the first stage ends at around the T-3 minute mark. And one of the other things that should have happened around by now on the countdown should be that Stromback retract as well, and that seems to not be happening right now. So, yeah, it's not looking great.
Admittedly, it's difficult to see the strong back because when we talk about the strong back, it is not that black lattice type structure. That is a crew tower. It is actually behind that in this view.
Yeah.
But yeah, the rocket should be frostier just based off the fact that we would be within 4 minutes at this point of the launch. The engine shutdown would have begun at T-7 minutes, and fuel load should be wrapping up theoretically in the next minute to 2 minutes, depending on first and second stage.
Yeah, I know it takes a bit of an effort, but you can even see the grid fins. Usually, those have a lot of frost underneath because they essentially fall down over the top of the liquid oxygen tank. You can see even that circle at the top of the tank. That's the sort of hatch to the inside of the tank. I know it's shaking, but you can also see a little bit of the Stromback still there on the side, right next to the black tower. But yeah, that shake, of course, could be the thing that might be, S-wording this mission. I'm not even gonna say it until it's confirmed, but it does look like we're not going to space today.
Yeah, we are 3 minutes to go. There's a lot more that we should be seeing at this point that we are not yet.
Yeah.
Right, Alex? I mean, there will be a big vent coming up at about a minute from now if everything is on track, if they were to purge the lines, right?
Yeah. It doesn't look like they're going today, and that's what I will say. Based on everything that we're seeing, the Stromback is not retracted, that liquid oxygen tank is not fully frosty. It doesn't look like they're launching. And SpaceX confirms that indeed they are going for. No, hang on.
No, that's yeah. No,
that's from that's correct.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody in the back channel confirmed things before you post them. Yeah, it still says the same thing that it was saying before. But of course, we're looking here at the rocket. It's of course not going today, and I can even see already some defrosting there on the booster. You can see some frost left over there as it goes down.
Yeah, you can see more of the soot. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, you're still waiting for an official word, but I think it's pretty safe to say that this rocket will be staying on the pad a little bit longer.
Yep.
Apparently, we do have confirmation that wind, as a shocker to no one, being the issue here, we're in excess, and that would be a scrub. So it appears that this rocket will not be going to space today. And Alex, there's a little bit of a caveat that could mean it might be a couple more days until we see this go off. It was mentioned earlier, but for those who are just kind of joining, why would we not maybe have a launch attempt tomorrow, Alex?
So in theory, the next opportunity will be tomorrow at 10:48 p.m. So like that will be Tuesday, 10:48 p.m. Eastern. The issue with that, though, is it will be within 24 hours of the Crew 10 mission. And NASA often prefers to have a bit of a buffer time there to be able to analyze the previous launch data. So they usually like that 24-hour time from one launch to the other before their crew missions in order to be able to, look at the data, make sure that there's nothing else going on there. On the other hand, though, the Crew 10 launch weather forecast, especially in the downrange area, is not looking too good. So there could be a chance that maybe they do go tomorrow with Starlink at that, time that I was just mentioning before. But because maybe Crew 10 is not going on Wednesday. And so we'll obviously keep following along and everything. You have our socials, right, Sawyer? And
Yeah.
so we're gonna be posting all of that there. We also have next spaceflight as well that you can check out and keep up to date with a launch schedules and everything that you may want from that. And of course, if they try to launch, we'll be live as well. So
Yep, we are on X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, and TikTok. So you could check us out on every single one of those, whichever is your favorite. Whichever one isn't your favorite, well, we don't like it then either. That's fine. But yeah, we have 3 rockets out on launch pads right now that are waiting to launch. We have the one that you see on your screen right now, Space Launch Complex 40, which will likely begin detanking. We have the one over next door at Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center side, where, as you mentioned, Crew 10 is scheduled to launch this coming Wednesday, 7:48 p.m. Eastern Time with an instantaneous launch window. And then we had the scrubbed attempt tonight out of Vandenberg Space Force Base, the worst coast, in my opinion, where Sphere X with NASA and SpaceX was supposed to launch, but that was scrubbed due to a combination of weather as well as an issue with one of the spacecraft on board. So that's 3 missions waiting to go within about a 36-hour period here. So this is going to be very interesting to see what happens. Max, I think it's safe to say you're probably not shocked by this delay.
And the camera almost blew over again just now.
Every time I go to ask you a question, the camera blows over.
Literally, yeah, I think so. I think that's probably a sign to have me sign off for the night and keep an eye on the cameras and make sure they don't blow over. Yeah, it's been pretty bad, and obviously I assume that's why SpaceX has opted to not take flight tonight. But I will try to get the camera realigned for the outro. But yeah, it has been a very gusty night here at the Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah, all of the winds have been ran through the night. We're not surprised that it didn't go, but again, we will wait to get the official update for when that next launch attempt will be, and as mentioned, that will be posted on all of our socials for everyone to see. I do want to take a second here and thank Anonymous from the store, getting an item and asking, do you think they're nearing the max flight rate for Falcon 9 with the current infrastructure? I believe we heard today they're targeting, around 170 launches? And there's a Have You Hugged a Booster Yet shirt. So hopefully we actually get there. And of course, the weather and all the spacecraft that are being launched have to cooperate too.
Yep.
I'm guessing Kevin Michael Reed is playing me out. Kevin is the one pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, producing tonight's stream. Thank you very much, Kevin. You heard Max Evans there, who is trying to make sure that all of our gear does not go slamming into the ground at 25 to 50 knots. So thank you. And thank you, Alex, for joining me here, too.
Yeah, we are the scrub team, I guess. But,
hey,
it happens.
Boy!
I would like to argue against that. Normally, we're pretty good, the 3 of us here.
It happened twice last month, if you remember. But yeah.
I intentionally chose not to remember those, okay? I'm trying to make our... I think there's a tally going in the back channel of who gets the most scrubs, at least from the production side. So add one to Kevin's tally. Anyway, when it does try to launch again here for the Starlink mission, we will be live for that and for Crew 10. The Crew 10 stream is already posted, by the way, so you can go ahead and hit the Remind Me button so that you know when we go live for the crew rollout and the launch later this coming Wednesday. I'm Sawyer Rosenstein. I've been your host, and we will see you again for the next one.
And here we go.
We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside SPE off. Say again, SPE off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Décollage.
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?